The boat was supposed to return before dark. It didn't. By the time the tide shifted, the radio had gone quiet and the island stopped feeling temporary. The man counted the supplies twice, then a third time, not because he thought he'd miscounted, but because counting was something his hands knew how to do. Across the sand, his boss sat with her back to a palm tree, shoes off, phone dead, saying nothing. He was a father before he was anything else. Every decision he made had a shape because of that. Even here, the child was not with him. That absence pressed harder than the heat. He imagined the missed bedtime, the unanswered call, the small routines that would break without explanation. When his boss finally spoke, it wasn't about rescue or blame. It was a question asked carefully, as if she already knew it was dangerous. She asked what would happen if they weren't found right away. Then later, she asked something else, something that could not be taken back. If you care about slow, grounded stories where choices leave marks, consider subscribing. The next chapter begins where the comfort ends. The boat was late by 20 minutes before anyone said it out loud. At first, it still felt like a schedule problem, the kind that corrected itself if no one interfered. The man stood near the edge of the narrow beach and checked his watch, even though he already knew what it would say. He had checked it less than a minute earlier. Habit, not information. The island was smaller than it had looked from the water. A curve of sand, some low brush, a line of trees that offered shade but not shelter. The air smelled of salt and something sweet that had already begun to rot. He took off his shoes and set them side by side above the tide line. He did it carefully, aligning them without thinking about why. He would notice later that he had done it the same way he lined up his child's sneakers at home. Behind him, his boss paced. She had been on the phone until the signal dropped, walking in tight lines, stopping only to look back toward the water. Each time she turned, her face held the same expectation, as if the boat might appear because she had checked again. He did not pace. He stayed close to the water, watching the tide push in and pull back. He tracked the pattern without meaning to. He had learned to measure time in small, repeatable things. The supplies were limited: a cooler, half full, one tarp, a bag with flares, a radio that no longer made sound. He opened the cooler and looked inside, then closed it again. He did not take anything out. Counting could wait. The delay crossed 30 minutes. His boss stopped pacing and stood next to him, close enough that he could hear her breathing change when she exhaled. She said his name, then stopped, as if unsure what she wanted to say after it. "The boat should have been back," she said instead. He nodded once. "It should have." She waited for him to add something. He didn't. He kept his eyes on the water. The island had been pitched as a quick stop, an inspection, a chance to show initiative. He had agreed because it was one afternoon, and because it mattered at work. It always mattered at work, until it didn't. He had told his child he would be back before dinner. He had said it clearly, without hesitation. He had not added any conditions. He stepped closer to the edge and shaded his eyes with his hand. The horizon was empty. Behind him, his boss sighed. "We should try the radio again." He turned and walked toward the bag. He knelt, opened it, and took out the radio. He held it to his ear, adjusted the dial, pressed the button. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. He set it down gently, as if it might break if he wasn't careful. "It was working earlier," she said. "It was," he agreed. She crossed her arms. "They know where we are." He didn't answer. He picked up the flares and checked them one by one. The motion was slow and deliberate. He wasn't preparing to use them yet. He just wanted to know how many there were. "How many?" she asked. "3," he said. She nodded, as if that was reassuring. The sun shifted. The light changed direction, not by much, but enough that he noticed. He imagined the kitchen clock at home, the small hand moving, the long one following. He imagined the sound it made when the room was quiet. His phone was dead. He had checked it already. He did it again anyway. No bars, no power. His boss sat down on a piece of driftwood and rubbed her temples. "This is inconvenient," she said. He did not correct her. He walked toward the trees and tested one branch with his hand. It bent but didn't break. He pulled harder, then twisted. It snapped cleanly. He set it aside. He did it again with another branch, then a third. He was building something without deciding what it was yet. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making shade," he said. "We already have shade." "Not enough," he said, and kept working. She watched him for a moment, then stood and brushed sand from her pants. She followed him into the tree line, stopping when the ground became uneven. She wasn't dressed for this. She knew it, and he knew she knew it. "You seem very calm," she said. He placed the branches against the trunk of a tree and adjusted their angle. "I'm not," he said. She waited, then smiled slightly. "You don't look worried." He stepped back and looked at the structure. It wasn't much, but it would block some sun. "I am," he said. "About what?" He hesitated. It was brief, but real. Then he said, "About the time." She nodded again. "They'll notice we're missing." "Yes," he said, "and they'll come back, yes." She seemed satisfied. She sat beneath the tree and leaned back. "Then we just wait." He did not sit. He walked back to the water and watched the tide again. The pattern had shifted. It was subtle, but the water came farther up the sand now. He adjusted the position of the shoes without thinking. The delay crossed an hour. The air grew heavier. His boss stopped checking the water and started watching him instead. He felt it, the way you feel eyes on your back. He didn't turn. "You have a child," she said. He turned then, not sharply, just enough to face her. "Yes." "How old?" "7." She smiled. "That's a good age." He didn't respond. "They must be with someone," she said. "Today?" "Yes." "So they're fine." He looked back at the water. "They are," he said. She shifted. "You don't have to worry." He picked up a flat stone and tossed it into the water. It skipped once, then sank. "I do," he said. The silence that followed was not empty. It held something unfinished. The sun moved again. He imagined the table at home, one place empty longer than it was supposed to be. Behind him, his boss stood and brushed the sand from her hands. "If this takes longer," she said, "we'll deal with it." He didn't answer. He took a step closer to the water and looked out, as if measuring distance. Nothing had happened yet. No decision had been made. But the day had already shifted away from what it was meant to be. And he felt it settle, quiet and steady, like something that would not lift on its own. He stayed where he was as the light continued to change. The sun climbed higher without urgency. It did not burn yet, but it pressed down with enough weight to make stillness uncomfortable. The man moved because staying still felt wrong. He lifted the cooler and carried it closer to the shade he had built. He set it down carefully, rotating it so the latch faced inward. It was a small thing, but it kept the contents cooler longer. His boss watched him from where she sat. She had taken off her jacket and folded it beside her. The phone lay face down on top of it, as if turning it over might change something. "You're very prepared," she said. He shrugged. "I pack the same way every day." "For work?" "For life," he said. She smiled again, but this time it didn't hold. "He didn't mention having a kid when you took this assignment." He opened the cooler and counted. 2 bottles of water. 1 juice. Sandwiches wrapped in paper. He closed it. "You didn't ask." She considered that. "I assume people will tell me what matters." He looked up at her. "Most people don't." She laughed softly. It was brief and cut off before it could settle. "Fair." He took the tarp and shook it out. Sand fell away. He tied one corner to the branches he had propped earlier, then pulled the other side tight and secured it to a tree trunk. The shade widened. It was enough for 2. When he stepped back, she moved into it without asking. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. They sat for a moment without speaking. The sound of the water filled the space. Somewhere farther inland, something small moved through the brush. He didn't turn to look. He listened instead, gauging distance, weight. "You're very quiet," she said. "I don't have much to say," he replied. "That's not true," she said. "Everyone has something to say." He took a bottle of water from the cooler and handed it to her. He kept the other one inside. Sometimes, he said, saying it doesn't help. She twisted the cap and drank. You always this careful? Yes, with everything. With what matters. She watched him closely now. Not as a boss. Not as someone waiting for direction. As someone trying to understand what she was sitting next to. What matters to you? She asked. He didn't answer right away. He adjusted the tarp where it sagged, tightening the knot. His hands knew the motion. He had tied the same kind of knot to hold a broken chair together at home. It had lasted longer than he expected. My child, he said. She nodded. Of course. And? She prompted. He shook his head. That's it. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Nothing else. He thought of his job, of the way it filled hours but not space, of the way it followed him home on his phone, of the way it promised stability and took presents in return. No, he said. She leaned back against the tree. You know, she said, that kind of focus is admirable. He didn't respond. But it can be limiting, she continued. People like you forget to look up. He turned toward her. I don't forget. You sure? She asked. He reached for the flares and checked them again. Still 3. He put them back in the bag. I look up, he said. I just don't stay there. She watched him for a moment, then stood and walked to the edge of the shade. She looked out at the water, then back at him. Do you trust me? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. He picked up the radio and turned the dial again. Still nothing. He set it down. Do I need to? He asked. She crossed her arms. We're in this together. Yes, he said, for now. Her mouth tightened. You don't think I'll do what's best. I think, he said carefully, you'll do what makes sense to you. And that's a problem? Sometimes, he said. She studied him. You don't talk like someone who needs this job. He picked up a stick and traced a line in the sand. It curved, then straightened. I need it, he said. I just don't need it more than I need something else. Her gaze sharpened. You have no idea how much leverage that gives you. He looked up. It doesn't. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. It does if I decide it does. He stood and brushed sand from his hands. The water's going to rise, he said. We should move the supplies higher. She glanced at the tide, then nodded. Fine. They moved the cooler, the bag, the shoes. He carried most of it without comment. She followed, holding what she could. When they were done, she sat again, this time closer to him. You know, she said, people notice reliability. He said nothing. People who show up, people who don't panic. He adjusted the tarp again. This isn't showing up, he said. This is waiting. She leaned forward. Waiting is part of leadership. He looked at her. So is knowing when not to. She exhaled slowly. You don't like being told what to do. I don't like being told what matters, he said. The air shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to mark something said that couldn't be unsaid. He reached into his pocket and took out a small folded paper. He smoothed it with his thumb. It was a drawing. Crayon, a house with uneven windows. 2 stick figures, one taller than the other. He hadn't realized he'd brought it until now. His boss saw it. What's that? He folded it again and put it back. Nothing. She didn't press. She stood and walked a few steps away, giving him space he hadn't asked for. You're different out here, she said. I'm the same, he replied. There's just less noise. She turned back toward him. If this takes longer, she said, things will get complicated. He nodded. They already are. She watched the water again. I can make things easier for you, she said. He looked at her, then at the horizon. Maybe, he said. But easier doesn't always mean better. The sun continued its slow movement. The island remained still. Somewhere, a child waited without knowing why. The man sat beneath the tarp, hands resting on his knees, carrying what he always carried, whether anyone saw it or not. By mid-afternoon, the shade had become the center of the island. Everything else radiated out from it. The cooler, the bag, the flares, the radio. The man had arranged them in a loose order that made sense to him. He knew where each thing was without looking. His boss stood just outside the shade, hands on her hips. The sun had reached the place where it caught the side of her face when she turned. She squinted and shifted, annoyed by it. "We should establish a plan," she said. He looked up at her. "We have one." She frowned. "Waiting isn't a plan." "It is if you're conserving," he said. She stepped into the shade. "I mean roles, responsibilities. We can't just sit here." He reached into the cooler and took out one sandwich. He didn't unwrap it yet. "We can," he said. "We just don't want to." She crossed her arms. "You're used to taking direction." He shook his head. "I'm used to deciding what matters. That's not how organizations work." He took a bite of the sandwich and chewed slowly. He didn't rush it. He swallowed. "That's how families do." She studied him. "You keep bringing it back to that." He wiped his hands on his pants. "Because that's the scale I work on." She paced a short distance, then stopped. "Fine," she said. "Then here's what matters. If rescue doesn't come today, we need to be visible. We need to signal at regular intervals. We need to keep the flares dry and ready." He nodded. "Agreed." "And," she continued, "we need to stay alert. One of us should always be watching the water." "I've been doing that," he said. "Yes," she said, "but we should alternate." He hesitated. "I'd rather not." Her eyebrows lifted. "Why not?" "Because," he said, "if I'm not watching, I won't know what I missed." She laughed, short and sharp. "You think I wouldn't tell you?" He didn't answer. She took a step closer. "You don't trust me." He looked at her evenly. "I trust that you'll tell me what you think is important." "And you think that's not enough?" "I think," he said, "that what's important to me isn't always visible." She exhaled through her nose. "This is not the time for philosophy." He picked up the radio again and adjusted the dial. Still nothing. He set it down and looked at the water. A thin line of white appeared far out, then disappeared. He leaned forward slightly, tracking it. "What was that?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just light." She waited. Then, frustrated, she said, "We can't have two people making independent decisions." "We're not," he said. "We're making compatible ones. That's not how authority works." He turned to face her. "There are no walls here," he said. "No desks. No titles." She straightened. "You don't stop being my employee because we're uncomfortable." He held her gaze. "I don't stop being a father." The words landed and stayed. She didn't respond immediately. She walked away from the shade and stood at the edge of the water. She kicked at the sand with the toe of her shoe. "I'm responsible for you out here," she said. He stood and joined her, stopping a few feet away. "You're responsible for getting us help," he said. "I'm responsible for not making things worse." She turned toward him. "Those aren't separate." "They are, if you have someone waiting," he said. She studied him. "You think I don't understand responsibility?" "I think," he said, "we understand different kinds." She looked back at the horizon. "I've worked for 20 years to be in a position where I can protect people." He nodded. "And I've worked 7 to make sure one person feels safe." She glanced at him. "You think that makes you more qualified?" "No," he said. "It makes me less flexible." She laughed quietly. "That's not a strength." "It is if you can't afford to bend," he said. The sun dipped behind a thin cloud. The light softened for a moment, then returned. He adjusted his stance, shielding his eyes again. "We should ration," she said. 2 sips every hour." He shook his head. "Not yet. We don't know how long this will take." "I know," he said. "That's why we don't start early." She stared at him. "You're overriding me." He looked at her. "I'm disagreeing." She clenched her jaw. "You're used to pushing back?" I'm used to being the last one responsible when something goes wrong, he said. She walked back to the shade and sat down hard. Fine, she said. You decide. He stayed where he was. I'm not deciding for you, he said. I'm not deciding for you. She looked up at him. That's the same thing. It isn't, he said. You have options. She laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Do I? He didn't answer. The tide had reached the line he'd marked earlier. He watched it touch the sand in retreat. He marked the new edge with his foot. Something's going to give, she said quietly. He nodded. It always does. She leaned back against the tree. When it does, she said, I hope you're ready to listen. He sat down and took another small bite of his sandwich. He chewed slowly, thinking of the clock at home, of the way it would look now. I am listening, he said. She closed her eyes. The shade held them both, but not evenly. The island remained unchanged. The distance between them did not. The heat settled in without warning. It did not rise or build. It arrived complete and heavy, as if it had been waiting for permission. The man felt it along the back of his neck first, then across his shoulders. He shifted his weight and rolled his sleeves higher. His boss stood and walked a short loop around the island. It took less time than it should have. When she came back, she stopped near the shade, but didn't sit. We should try the flares, she said. He looked up at her. Not yet. Her mouth tightened. Why are you so resistant? He picked up a stick and drew another line in the sand, closer to the water than the last. Because once we use one, he said, we can't use it again. She crossed her arms. That's the point. The point, he said, is to use it when it matters most. She stared at the horizon. It matters now. He shook his head. It will matter more later. You don't know that. I know enough, he said. She took a step toward the bag. He stood at the same time. He didn't block her. He didn't need to. He just stood where she could see him. You're not in charge, she said. He met her eyes. Neither are you. She laughed sharply. I am always in charge. He didn't raise his voice. Not of me. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the trees, something moved again. He turned his head slightly, listening. It was small. It wasn't a threat. He relaxed. You're undermining me, she said. I'm protecting something, he replied. And what about me? She asked. Do I not matter? He hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. You do, he said, but not the same way. Her face changed. The shift was quick but clear. You think that makes you righteous. No, he said. I think it makes me narrow. She took another step toward the bag. We need to do something. He reached down and picked up the bag before she could. He moved it farther into the shade. It was a simple action. It landed hard. That's a decision, she said. Yes, he said. She stared at him. You don't get to make unilateral calls. He set the bag down and looked at her. I get to decide what I won't trade. She laughed again, but this time it broke off unevenly. You're impossible. He shrugged. I've been called worse. She walked away, pacing faster now. Her steps left deeper marks in the sand. She stopped near the water and kicked at it, splashing her ankle. This is absurd, she said. We're two capable adults stranded on the beach, and you're acting like I'm asking you to abandon your child. He said nothing. She turned toward him. I'm asking you to trust me. He picked up the radio again and pressed the button. Still nothing. He set it down. I don't think trust works like that, he said. How does it work? She demanded. It grows, he said. Or it doesn't. She stared at him. You don't have time for that. He looked at the sun. It had moved again. Neither do I. She walked back to the shade and sat, this time facing away from him. Her shoulders were tense. She rubbed her hands together, then stopped, as if noticing she was doing it. You know, she said, not turning around. People like you get stuck. He took a bottle of water and poured a small amount into the cap. He drank from it, then put the cap back on. Stuck how? In one roll, she said. You shrink everything else to fit it. He thought of the drawing in his pocket. He thought of the way his child lined up toys in careful rows, the way disruption made them pause. Yes, he said. She turned back toward him. That's not healthy. He met her gaze. It's necessary. She shook her head. You're choosing limitation. I'm choosing clarity, he said. The wind shifted. The tart flapped once, then settled. He tightened the knot again. His fingers were steady. What if this costs you? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. He walked to the water and knelt, touching it with his hand. It was warmer now. He stood and brushed his hand on his pants. It already has, he said. She watched him. You think I don't see that? I think, he said, you see it as waste. She flinched. That's unfair. He nodded. It might be. She stood and walked closer, stopping just short of him. You think I don't sacrifice? I think, he said carefully. You choose when to. Her eyes narrowed. And you don't? He looked past her, toward the horizon. I don't get to. The words hung between them. She stepped back as if she'd been pushed. This isn't over, she said. He nodded. I know. The heat pressed in. The island offered no relief. A small fracture had formed. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough to change how weight would be carried from here on. Neither of them sat down again for a long time. The afternoon stretched past usefulness. The light flattened, bleaching color from the sand and trees until everything looked the same shade of pale. The man stopped marking the tide. It had reached the line and held there as if waiting. He adjusted the tarp again, though it no longer needed it. His hands moved because they had learned that stillness invited thought, and thought led back to the same place. His boss sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. She had stopped pacing. The energy she'd burned earlier had nowhere to go now. She watched him with a look that was no longer about control. It was about endurance. How long do you think? She asked. He looked at the horizon. I don't know. You always seem to know. He shook his head. I just decide what I'll prepare for. And what's that? She asked. Night, he said. Her mouth tightened. You think we'll be here that long? I think we might be. She looked away. They wouldn't leave us. They might not know yet, he said. She exhaled slowly. You don't miss much, do you? He picked up one of the flares and checked the seal. I miss plenty, he said. Like what? He hesitated, then set the flare back down. This conversation. She laughed quietly. It surprised them both. The sound didn't last. He opened the cooler and took out the juice. He handed it to her without comment. She looked at it, then at him. For me? She asked. For now, he said. She drank, slower than before. When she handed it back, she said, You think I'm reckless? He shook his head. I think you're used to options. And you're not? He looked at the shade, at the supplies, at the shoes lined above the tide. I'm used to limits. She studied him. That's a choice. Not really, he said. It's a condition. The sun dipped lower. The light changed again, longer shadows stretching across the sand. The island began to feel smaller, not because it had changed, but because time had. They tried the radio again. Nothing. He stood and walked the perimeter of the island slower now. He counted his steps without realizing it. When he returned, he sat under the shade and leaned back against the tree. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. He didn't trust sleep yet. His boss watched him. If this goes into tomorrow, she said, there will be questions. Yes, he said. Investigations. Yes. People will want explanations. He nodded. She leaned forward. I can help with that. He looked at her. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly, she said. Stability. Assurance. I can make sure this doesn't touch your record. He didn't respond. You have a child, she continued. You can't afford uncertainty. He picked up a flat stone and rolled it between his hands. I live with it, he said. That's different. It isn't, he said. It's just quieter. She stared at him. You're not hearing me. He met her eyes. I am. And, he set the stone down, and I'm not answering yet. Her jaw tightened. You think waiting gives you control. No, he said. I think answering too fast takes it away. The wind shifted again. The tarp fluttered, then stilled. The sound of the water grew louder as the light faded. A bird passed overhead, low and fast. Both of them looked up at the same time. It didn't circle. It didn't slow. The man felt something tighten in his chest. He stood and picked up the flares, setting them within reach. He checked the shoes again, moving them another inch back. We should eat, his boss said. He nodded. He unwrapped the second sandwich and split it in half. He handed one piece to her and kept the other. They ate in silence. As the sun moved closer to the horizon, the island shifted from hot to watchful. The air cooled just enough to make the coming dark noticeable. His boss broke the silence. If you had to choose, she said, between being seen as reliable and being seen as difficult. He stood before she could finish. He walked to the edge of the water and scanned the distance again. Nothing. He turned back to her. I already did, he said. She stared at him. You don't know that. He shook his head. I knew it when I agreed to come. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She leaned back against the tree, staring up at the leaves. The light thinned. Shadows lengthened. The island prepared for night without asking them what they wanted. The man sat beneath the tarp, hands folded, eyes open. Pressure had settled in, heavy and unrelieved. No decision yet, no release, just the knowledge that something would have to give. The sun slipped below the line without ceremony. One moment it was there, thinning the air with its weight, and the next it wasn't. The island cooled unevenly. The sand held heat. The trees did not. The man felt it first in his feet. He stood and shook them out, then put his shoes back on. He did not tie them yet. He left the laces loose, ready. His boss watched him from the shade. She had wrapped her jacket around her shoulders. The phone was still in her hand, dark and useless. Night arrived slowly. Sounds grew clearer. The water seemed closer, louder. Somewhere in the brush, something small moved again. He listened long enough to place it, then stopped listening. It wasn't worth the energy. He lit a small fire near the edge of the shade, not for warmth, for visibility. He fed it carefully, controlling the size. He didn't want smoke yet. Smoke could wait. They sat on opposite sides of it. The light cast uneven shadows across their faces. The fire gave shape to the space between them. This is worse than I thought, she said. He nodded. It usually is. She watched the flames. They'll notice by morning. Probably, he said. And if they don't? He adjusted one of the branches feeding the fire. Then we keep doing this. She rubbed her hands together. You're very comfortable with if. He looked up at her. I'm not. I just don't pretend it isn't there. The fire cracked softly. He added another piece of wood. Sparks rose, then disappeared. She shifted closer to the fire. You haven't eaten much. I'm not hungry, he said. That's not true. It is, he said, for now. She studied him. You're conserving yourself. Yes. For what? He didn't answer. The silence stretched. The island felt farther from the world now. Not physically, emotionally. He imagined the house at home, lights on, the sound of running water, the absence at the table. His boss broke the silence. You know what happens if this turns into an incident? Yes, he said. Reviews, reports, questions about judgment. Yes. She leaned forward slightly. People don't like unanswered questions. He met her gaze. Neither do children. She paused. The firelight caught her face differently now, flattening it, stripping something away. You keep bringing them into this, she said. Because they're already here, he replied. She inhaled slowly. You think I'm offering something selfish. I think you're offering something useful, he said. That's different. She nodded once. Good. She stood and walked a few steps away, then turned back toward him. The movement was deliberate, measured. I can make sure this doesn't hurt you, she said. He stayed seated. It already has. She ignored that. I can make sure no one questions your decisions out here. He watched the fire. They should. She stepped closer. I can make sure your position is secure, that you're not seen as a liability. He looked up at her. And in return, she hesitated. It was the first time she had. Cooperation, she said. With what? With me, she said. With how this is framed, with how it's remembered. He stood slowly. You're talking about later? Yes. He looked around the island, the dark, the water, the fire. We're still here, he said. That's exactly why I'm saying this now, she replied. He picked up a stick and adjusted the fire again, lowering it. The flames responded immediately. He watched them settle. You want me to agree before I know the cost, he said. She shook her head. I want you to understand the cost if you don't. He straightened. Say it plainly. She met his eyes. If this becomes a failure, it will follow you. It will touch everything. Your role, your income, your stability. He waited. She continued. If it becomes a managed delay, it becomes a story of resilience, of leadership under pressure. And you're the one who tells that story, he said. Yes. He nodded slowly. And my child? She didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer to the fire, then stopped. Your child benefits from stability, she said. From predictability, from not having their life disrupted by avoidable fallout. He felt something tighten. Not panic, recognition. You're asking me to stay aligned with you, he said. I'm asking you to trust me, she replied. To stay calm, to not take unnecessary risks. He looked at the flares, at the radio, at the water. And if a boat comes, he asked. She followed his gaze. Then we handle it together. He nodded. And if it doesn't? She held his eyes. Then we do what we have to do. He stepped back. The sand shifted under his foot. He steadied himself. You're asking me to stay, he said. She didn't correct him. To wait, he continued. Even if another option appears. She didn't deny it. You're asking me to choose the version of this that protects me later, he said, over the one that ends it sooner. She exhaled slowly. I'm asking you to think long term. He looked away toward the dark water. Long term for who? For you, she said. For your child. He closed his eyes briefly. The image came uninvited. A small face, expectant, certain. When he opened them, he said, You don't get to use them like that. She stiffened. I'm not using anything. You are, he said. You're framing. She crossed her arms. You think rescue is just about timing. It is, he said. It's about outcome, she replied. He turned back toward her. Those aren't the same. She stepped closer. They can be. The fire popped. A piece of wood shifted. He reached down and moved it back into place. The action grounded him. You want an answer, he said. Yes. Now. Yes. He looked at the island again. At the fire. At the flares. At the shoes. Still lined neatly above the tide. He imagined the morning, the call that wouldn't come. The explanation he would owe. I can't promise you anything, he said. She stared at him. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have, he said. Her jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. He nodded. I might be. She turned away from him and walked back to the tree. She sat down hard, pulling the jacket tighter around her shoulders. Think about it, she said. We have time. He stayed standing, watching the water. The fire burned lower now. The island had gone quiet in a way that felt final. He thought of the drawing in his pocket, of the house with uneven windows, of the certainty it represented. Nothing had been agreed to. Nothing had been refused. But the question had been asked, and would not leave them alone. The night held. Not completely still, but settled. The fire burned low, its edges red, steady enough to last if tended. The man sat with his back against the tree, legs stretched out in front of him. He kept his eyes open. Sleep felt like a risk he couldn't afford yet. His boss sat a few feet away, turned slightly from him. She had stopped trying to fill the quiet. The question she had asked lingered without needing words. He listened to the water. Each wave arrived with the same sound, then pulled back. He counted, without counting, tracking rhythm instead of number. It was something he had learned during long nights when his child couldn't sleep. Patterns steadied both of them. The fire shifted. He leaned forward and added a single piece of wood, not because it was needed, but because movement kept his body from stiffening. The flame rose briefly, then settled again. "You're still thinking," she said. "Yes," he replied. "You don't have to answer right now." He looked at the fire. "I know." She adjusted her jacket. "But you will." He didn't respond. The silence that followed wasn't passive. It pressed. It asked for shape. He felt the weight of it in his shoulders, in the way his jaw stayed tight, even when he tried to relax it. At some point the wind shifted. The smoke moved toward the water instead of the trees. He noticed without reacting. It was useful information, but not yet. He stood and walked to the edge of the shade. He checked the supplies again. Nothing had changed. The bag was where he'd left it. The flares were dry. The radio was still dead. He hesitated, then moved the bag a few inches farther from the fire. It was a small adjustment. It didn't announce itself, but it mattered. Behind him, his boss watched. "You're rearranging," she said. "I'm thinking," he replied. She didn't argue. He walked to the water and stood there listening. The night hid distance. Sound traveled differently now. He scanned the dark, searching for anything that broke the pattern. Nothing did. When he turned back, his boss was closer to the fire again. She looked smaller in the dark, less contained. The authority she carried during the day didn't disappear, but it loosened. "You know," she said, "people don't usually push back this hard." He sat down again. "People usually don't have to." She studied him. "You think this is about defiance." "I think it's about timing," he said. "And you think waiting helps." He looked at the fire. "Waiting keeps options open." She leaned forward. "Not all options." He met her eyes. "The ones that matter." She exhaled sharply. "You're already choosing." He didn't deny it. "You moved the bag," she said. "You lowered the fire earlier. You're preparing for staying." He felt the words land. They were accurate. That was what made them uncomfortable. "I'm preparing for night," he said. She shook her head. "You're preparing for alignment." He didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and took out the folded drawing. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing it against his knee. He looked at it without expression. The house leaned slightly to one side. The taller stick figure held the smaller one's hand. He folded it again and put it back. "What's that?" she asked. "A reminder," he said. She waited. He didn't add anything. The fire crackled. A log shifted and sent a spark into the air. He watched it rise and disappear. "If rescue comes in the morning," she said, "how do you want this to look?" He looked at her. "I want it to end." "That's not an answer," she said. "It's the only one I trust," he replied. She sat back, frustration visible now. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." He shook his head. "I'm making it clearer." She stood and walked a few steps away, then turned back. "You know what happens to people who don't play along." He met her gaze. "Yes. And you're willing to risk that?" He didn't respond immediately. He picked up a flat stone and tossed it toward the water. It disappeared into the dark without a sound. "I already am," he said. The night deepened. The island felt smaller, more contained. He lay back and rested his head against the tree, eyes still open. At some point, his boss stopped watching him. She leaned back and closed her eyes, though he doubted she slept. He stayed alert, but something had shifted. The tension had taken shape. Silence had become a decision, not an absence. He had not agreed, he had not refused, but he had adjusted, and that adjustment carried weight. The fire burned low and steady as the night moved forward, holding the space where the question remained unanswered. Morning came without color. The sky lightened first, thinning the dark until the island reappeared in pieces. The man noticed it before he moved. He had slept, but lightly. His body felt used, not rested. The fire had burned down to ash and a single glowing edge. He stirred it once, then let it die. Smoke would matter later. For now, it was better to keep the air clear. His boss woke shortly after. She sat up slowly, rubbing her face, disoriented for a moment before memory returned. When it did, her shoulders tightened. "Morning," she said. He nodded. "Morning." They drank water without speaking. He poured carefully, measuring by feel. The bottle was lighter now. He capped it and set it back in the cooler. The island looked different in daylight, smaller, closer. The water was calm, the surface broken only by distant movement that never came near enough to matter. He stood and scanned the horizon. He did it methodically, left to right, then back again. He stopped at the same points each time, letting his eyes adjust. Nothing. Behind him, his boss watched. "We should signal," she said. He didn't answer right away. He picked up one of the flares and checked it again. The seal was intact. He set it down. "Not yet," he said. Her jaw tightened. "You said that yesterday." "Yes," he said, "and now it's morning." "Yes." She stood and walked closer. "You moved the bag last night." He met her gaze, so it wouldn't get damp. "You're preparing to stay." "I'm preparing to last," he said. She shook her head. "This is costing us time." He looked at the water. "Time is already costing us." She exhaled sharply. "If a boat passes and doesn't see us, then we'll know when to use it," he said. "And if we don't—" He paused. It was brief, but real. "Then that will be on me." She stared at him. "You're willing to take that?" He nodded. "Yes." The admission changed something. The air between them shifted. It wasn't anger now. It was calculation. She stepped back. "You understand what that means?" He didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the water and knelt, touching it again. It was cooler now. He rinsed his hands and stood. As the morning stretched, the island stayed quiet. No engines, no voices, only the water and the birds overhead. He performed small tasks. He tightened knots. He adjusted shade. He reorganized supplies again, though nothing had moved. Each action took time. Time passed because of them. His boss watched without interrupting. When she finally spoke, her voice was controlled. "You're delaying," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Intentionally." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Then we should talk about what that costs." He sat down under the shade. "I know what it costs." "You don't know all of it," she said. "If this turns into a reportable delay, there will be scrutiny." "Yes." "And if questions are asked about why we didn't signal sooner?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "You will need someone to corroborate your reasoning." He looked up at her. "Or someone to contradict it." She held his gaze. "I can do either." The words landed cleanly. No threat. No drama. Just fact. He looked away. He picked up the radio and pressed the button again. Still nothing. He set it down. "You want me to commit," he said. "I want you to align," she replied. He watched the water. A shape appeared far out, too small to identify. He straightened, tracking it. It disappeared again, leaving nothing behind. His boss followed his gaze. Was that something? No, he said. Just movement. She nodded, then said, if it had been something, would you have signaled? He didn't answer right away. He adjusted the flare bag, bringing it closer. Yes, he said. But you didn't see enough to be sure. No. So you waited. Yes. She exhaled. That hesitation matters. It always does, he said. The sun climbed higher. The heat returned, slower this time. Sweat gathered at the base of his neck. He ignored it. At some point, he stopped checking the horizon, as often. Not because he had given up, but because he was measuring something else now. Time against consequence. Delay against outcome. He reached into his pocket and touched the folded drawing without taking it out. The paper was soft now, worn at the edges. His boss watched the gesture. She didn't comment. You know, she said finally, if this works out, no one will question it. He looked at her. And if it doesn't? She met his eyes. Then you'll need me. The water remained calm. The island held them without offering direction. Waiting was no longer neutral. It had become an action. And it was costing something, even before anyone could name what. The day broke open slowly, then all at once. The sun reached its full weight by mid-morning, pressing down until the air felt thick again. The man stopped moving for a while. He sat beneath the shade and let the heat settle, conserving energy the way he had learned to do years ago. His boss paced near the water, shorter loops now. Her eyes kept returning to him, measuring. She no longer tried to hide it. He took the drawing out again, this time without thinking. He unfolded it and smoothed it flat against his thigh. The paper was creased and soft from being handled too often. His child had handed it to him that morning without ceremony. Just held it out and waited. He had asked what it was. For you, they had said. That was all. He remembered how they had stood there, backpack half-zipped, one shoe untied, waiting for him to look long enough. Waiting not for praise, but for acknowledgement. He had said he'd put it somewhere safe. He had meant his pocket. He had meant his mocket. But he had not said he might need it. The memory tightened something behind his ribs. You keep touching that, his boss said. He looked up. What? Whatever's in your pocket. He folded the drawing again and put it away. Habit, he said. She watched him. You're quieter today. I'm listening, he said. To what? He didn't answer. The island was still. No boats, no planes, just heat and water and waiting. He closed his eyes briefly. Another memory surfaced, uninvited. A night not long ago. His child sitting at the table, legs swinging, voice steady. Don't be late, they had said. Not angry. Not pleading. Just factual. He opened his eyes. His boss was watching him closely now. What? She asked. He shook his head. Nothing. She stepped closer. You're somewhere else. He stood. The movement was abrupt enough to draw her attention. He walked to the edge of the water and stared out again. The horizon was empty. Say it, she said. He turned back toward her. My child told me once, he said, that when I say I'll be there, they don't worry anymore. She didn't respond. They said it like it was obvious, he continued, like it was a rule of the world. He stopped there. He did not explain further. The words hung between them, simple and complete. His boss looked away first. She crossed her arms and stared at the sand. That's not fair, she said. He didn't argue. You're making this about something it isn't, she said. He shook his head. I'm making it about exactly what it is. She turned back toward him. You think waiting longer honors that? He looked at the flares, at the radio, at the water. I think breaking certainty costs more than people realize, he said. She scoffed quietly. Certainty is a luxury. It's a necessity, he said, for some people. She studied him. You're willing to risk everything else for that. He nodded. Yes. The admission felt lighter than he expected, not easier, clearer. A sound reached them then. Faint. Mechanical. He stiffened immediately, head turning toward it. His heart rate spiked, sharp and sudden. His boss heard it too. "That's something," she said. He scanned the horizon. The sound faded, then returned, then disappeared again. "Could be wind," she said. He didn't respond. His hand hovered near the flares, not touching them yet. The sound did not return. The silence afterward felt different. Thinner. As if something had passed close enough to matter. His boss looked at him. "You hesitated." "Yes," he said. "And if that had been rescue—" "It wasn't," he said. She stared at him. "You're sure?" He shook his head. "No." She exhaled sharply. "Then why didn't you signal?" He met her gaze. "Because I wasn't sure." "That's not enough," she said. "It is for me," he replied. She stepped back. "You're choosing uncertainty." He shook his head. "I'm choosing honesty." The sun continued its slow climb. The island remained unchanged. But something in him had shifted. The child's voice had cut through the noise cleanly. Not dramatic, not emotional, just true. And once heard, it could not be ignored. The sound came again an hour later. This time it stayed. Low at first, almost part of the water, then steady enough to separate itself from it. The man stood before his boss said anything. His body reacted faster than his thoughts. He shaded his eyes and scanned the horizon. There, far out, near where the water darkened. A shape. Too small to name, but moving with purpose. His heart tightened. Not relief. Focus. His boss stepped beside him. "That's a boat," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "It's coming this way." "Maybe," he said again. She turned toward the flares. Now. He didn't move. The shape grew clearer, then stalled. It shifted direction slightly, angling away, then back again. The distance made everything uncertain. Sound arrived late. Motion arrived distorted. "Now," she said, louder. He watched. He tracked speed, angle, drift. He had learned to do that with passing cars at crosswalks, deciding when it was safe to step forward, holding a small hand. His boss reached for the flare bag. He didn't stop her. He just said, "Wait." She froze. "We don't have time." "We do," he said, "if it's coming." "And if it's not?" He didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the water. The boat turned again, just enough to matter. It slowed. Then it continued on its path, parallel now, not toward them. His boss swore under her breath. "You let it pass." He felt the weight of that immediately. It settled in his chest, heavy and cold. "It didn't see us," she said. He nodded. "No." "You could have." "I know," he said. She turned on him. "That was it. That was our chance." He didn't argue. He bent and picked up the flare anyway, checking it one last time. His hands were steady. That was worse. "You hesitated," she said. "Yes." And because of that, "yes," he said again. The boat was already farther away now. Its sound thinned, then disappeared. The island went quiet in a way it hadn't before. The quiet after something had happened, not the quiet of waiting. His boss stared at the empty water. "You chose wrong." He didn't respond. "You chose your principle over rescue," she continued. He looked at the flares. "I chose certainty." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Certainty? You don't know what just happened." "I know what I didn't do," he said. She turned back toward him, eyes bright with anger now. "Do you understand what this looks like?" "Yes," he said. "You delayed rescue." "Yes, intentionally." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She stepped closer. "You crossed a line." He met her gaze. "I know." She stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Then she straightened, smoothing her jacket, reclaiming something familiar. "From this point on," she said, "this is no longer ambiguous." He waited. "You will need me," she said, "to explain this, to contextualize it." He nodded slowly. "I already do." The admission cost him something. He felt it leave, clean and final. She watched his face. Then we're clear. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He walked to the water and stared at the place where the boat had been. The surface was smooth again, giving nothing back. Behind him, his boss picked up the flare bag and set it closer to herself. The balance of the island had shifted, not physically, structurally. A decision had been made whether he named it or not, and it could not be undone. The heat returned heavier after the boat disappeared, as if the island were closing around the decision that had been made. The man sat under the shade without moving. His legs felt stiff. He let them be. Movement would not change what had already happened. His boss stood with the flare bag at her feet. She did not open it. She did not need to. Possession was enough. "We need to talk," she said. He nodded. "We are." She paced once, then stopped in front of him. "What you did will be questioned." "Yes." "And when it is," she said, "intent will matter." He looked at the sand near his shoes. The tide had pulled back slightly, leaving a dark line behind. He marked it with his heel without realizing it. "You hesitated," she continued. "That can be framed as caution, or as negligence." He looked up. "By who?" "By me," she said. The word landed with weight, not threat, authority. She crouched slightly, bringing herself closer to his level. "I can say you were following my direction." He shook his head. "You weren't giving any." "I can say you were waiting for my confirmation." He met her gaze. "You didn't." She straightened. "I can say what I need to." He leaned back against the tree. The bark pressed into his shoulder. It grounded him. "And in return?" he asked. She exhaled. "Consistency." "With what?" he said. "With me," she replied. "With how we describe this. With how you behave from here on out." He glanced at the horizon again. Nothing moved. "You want control," he said. "I want coherence," she corrected. "Stories fall apart when people contradict each other." He nodded slowly. "And if I don't?" She didn't answer immediately. She picked up the water bottle and weighed it in her hand. "Then this becomes messy," she said. "Messy things don't land softly." He watched the bottle, then her hand. "And my child?" She met his eyes. "Your child benefits if this ends cleanly." The phrasing was careful. He noticed. "You're not promising anything new," he said. "I'm protecting what you already have," she replied. He reached into his pocket and touched the folded drawing again. He didn't take it out this time. He didn't need to. "What happens if another boat comes?" he asked. She answered without hesitation. "We coordinate." "And if I see it first?" She held his gaze. "Then you wait." The words settled between them. "Wait." He looked at the flares, at the radio, at the water. "And if waiting cost us?" he asked. She shrugged slightly. "Then we manage the cost." He closed his eyes briefly. The child's voice surfaced again, uninvited but steady. "When I say I'll be there, they don't worry anymore." He opened his eyes. "You're asking me to let you decide when this ends." She nodded. "Yes, and to accept whatever explanation follows." "Yes." He sat in silence. The island offered no guidance. The water remained calm, indifferent. "I need to know something," he said. She waited. "If we don't get out of this today," he continued, "and this becomes public." "It won't," she said. He shook his head. "If it does," he said, "will you stand by what you say?" She held his gaze. She held his gaze. "I stand by what's useful." The honesty was clean. He appreciated it more than reassurance. He stood slowly. His body protested, then adjusted. He walked to the edge of the shade and looked out again. Nothing. When he turned back, she was watching him closely, waiting. He picked up the flare bag and moved it back to where it had been before, not closer to him, not closer to her. Between them, I won't contradict you, he said. She exhaled, relief flickering briefly across her face. But I won't lie for you, he added. Her expression tightened. That may not be enough. It's all I have, he said. She studied him. You're still holding back. Yes, he said. She nodded slowly. Then we'll work with that. She sat down under the shade, closer to him than before. Not touching. Close enough to matter. The terms were not written. They did not need to be. The island held them in place, waiting to see which version of the story would survive. The sound came from the opposite direction this time. The man heard it while he was tightening the tarp, fingers working a knot that didn't need fixing. The engine noise cut across the water cleanly, closer than before. He froze, listening. It didn't fade. It grew. He turned toward the sound and saw it immediately. A boat, closer now. Close enough to see shape and wake. Close enough that uncertainty had narrowed to seconds. His body reacted before permission. His hand went to the flares. Behind him, his boss said his name. He stopped. The boat angled toward the island, not directly, but with enough intent that it could not be mistaken. Someone on board stood, lifting something to their face. Binoculars, maybe. A hand. He couldn't tell yet. He picked up the flare. Wait, she said. He turned his head just enough to see her. She was standing now, posture controlled, eyes sharp. The flare bag was at her feet, but she did not reach for it. She didn't need to. They're coming, he said. Not yet, she replied. They haven't committed. They're close enough. Close enough isn't enough, she said. The boat slowed. It turned slightly, correcting its angle. The sound of the engine softened, then steadied again. He felt the pressure settle in his chest, heavier than before. This wasn't about judgment now. It was about action. If you fire now, she said, we lose control of how this ends. He looked at the flare in his hand. Imagine the red streak against the sky. The clarity of it. The finality. They'll see us, he said. Yes, she said. And then there will be questions. He turned toward her. There are already questions. Not yet, she said. Not officially. The boat was close enough now that he could see two figures on deck. One pointed. The other shook their head. His boss stepped closer. If you trust me, she said, you'll wait. He looked at the water, at the boat, at the space between. The child's voice did not come this time. There was no memory, no line to steady him. There was only consequence. He lowered the flare slightly. Not all the way. Just enough. The boat slowed again. It hesitated. Then, with a shift so small it felt intentional, it turned away. The engine sound changed pitch. It began to move past them, not toward. No, he said, out loud this time. He raised the flare. His boss reached out and grabbed his wrist. Don't, she said. The contact was brief, firm. She didn't pull. She didn't have to. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. In that moment, someone on the boat turned again. A final glance. Then they sat. The boat moved on. The sound faded faster than before. The water smoothed behind it, erasing the wake. His boss released his wrist. The flare burned cold in his hand. He lowered it slowly and set it down on the sand. Neither of them spoke. The island felt different now. Not because they were still stranded, but because what had happened would be seen, if not now, then later. His boss broke the silence. That, she said, was restraint. He didn't respond. That will matter, she added. He turned away from her and walked to the water. He stared at the place where the boat had been. The surface reflected the sky, blank and bright. Behind him, she picked up the flare and returned it to the bag. She closed it carefully. When he turned back, she was already smoothing her jacket, reclaiming herself. From this point on, she said, we're aligned. He looked at her. You took that from me. She didn't deny it. I kept us protected. He shook his head. You decided. Yes, she said, and you let me. The words landed heavier than accusation. He sat down under the shade. His hands rested on his knees, empty now. He stared at the sand, at the marks left by his shoes, at the line the tide no longer reached. Later, when this was described, there would be language for it. Calm, judgment, professionalism. None of that would mention the moment his wrist had been held. None of it would mention the flare cooling in his palm. None of it would mention the child who would ask why he hadn't come home. The choice had been made visible, and it would follow him off the island, whether anyone spoke of it or not. They were found the next morning. Not by chance, not by sudden clarity. A routine check, a delayed report finally reaching the right desk, a boat sent out with coordinates that should have been acted on sooner. When it arrived, there was no confusion. The captain called out. Hands waved. The engines slowed and cut. The island released them without ceremony. The man stepped onto the boat first. He did it carefully, testing the surface before putting his weight down. He helped his boss aboard without looking at her face. The movement was practiced, polite. No one asked questions yet. On the ride back, the wind cut across his face, sharp and clean. The island shrank behind them. The water returned to being just water. His boss sat across from him, posture straight, hair pulled back. She spoke with the captain quietly, using a tone he recognized. Calm, controlled. The kind that shaped memory before it settled. He stared at his hands. They were steady again. At the dock, people waited. A small group. Too small for spectacle, big enough for notice. Someone handed him a bottle of water. Someone else asked if they were okay. Yes, he said. His boss answered questions before he could. Timing. Conditions. Caution. Her voice did not shake. He did not interrupt. Later, in a small office that smelled like disinfectant and old paper, he sat across from someone who took notes while listening. His boss sat beside him, close enough to matter. You chose not to signal immediately, the person said. Yes, he replied. Why? He paused. He could feel her attention shift toward him. Not pressure. Expectation. I wasn't sure, he said. The answer landed flat. Insufficient. His boss filled the space. We assessed conditions and decided visibility was improving, she said. We didn't want to waste resources prematurely. The person nodded and wrote. He did not contradict her. When it was over, when signatures were placed and explanations accepted, they stood outside in the afternoon light. The world had resumed its shape. You did well, she said. He looked at her. I didn't lie. She smiled slightly. You didn't need to. On the drive home, traffic moved slowly. He checked the time without thinking. It was later than it should have been, later than any version he had promised. When he opened the front door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. His child sat at the table drawing. The same uneven house. The same two figures. They looked up. You're late, they said. There was no accusation in it, just fact. Yes, he replied. They nodded and went back to drawing. He set his bag down and stood there, unsure where to put himself. The routine had resumed, but something in it was thinner now. At dinner, his child ate without talking much. When they finished, they carried their plate to the sink without being asked. Are you going away again? They asked. No, he said quickly. They looked at him. You said that before. The words were quiet. They did not linger. They did not need to. Later, after bedtime, he stood in the hallway and listened to the steady sound of breathing through the door. He waited longer than necessary before turning away. At work the next day, things were smooth. Too smooth. His boss nodded when she passed him. Others treated him the same. Stability had been preserved. That night, his child left the drawing on the table instead of handing it to him. The change was small. It was enough. The meeting was scheduled without discussion. A calendar invite. 15 minutes. No description. The man saw it when he checked his phone during his lunch break. He stared at the screen longer than necessary, then locked it and put it face down on the table. At home that morning, his child had eaten quickly and left early. No drawing. No reminder. Just a backpack slung over one shoulder and a distracted wave. Pick you up? He had asked. They nodded without looking back. At work, the meeting room was small and glass-walled. His boss was already inside when he arrived. She didn't stand, she didn't gesture. She waited. He sat across from her. The door closed softly behind him. "This won't take long," she said. He nodded. She folded her hands on the table. "There's follow-up." "Yes," he said. "People are curious," she continued. "Not officially. Yet." He said nothing. "They've noticed how this resolved," she said. "How clean it was." He watched her hands. "Clean isn't the word I'd use." She smiled faintly. "It's the one that matters." She leaned back. "There's an opportunity." He looked up. "For what?" "For alignment," she said again. "A formal one this time." He waited. "A role," she continued. "More responsibility, more visibility, a seat closer to decision-making." He pictured longer hours. More travel. The phone on the table at dinner. "And," he said. "And it requires flexibility," she said. "Availability, the kind that doesn't always come with notice." He nodded slowly. "You handled pressure well on the island," she said. "That didn't go unnoticed." He looked at the glass wall. Outside, people moved past without slowing. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She studied him, then said nothing dramatic. He waited. "You stay where you are," she said. "But the expectations don't change." He leaned back in his chair. "They already have." She tilted her head. "Have they?" "Yes," he said. "I'm being asked to choose again." She smiled slightly. "That's leadership." He shook his head. "That's pressure." She leaned forward. "You're good under it." He thought of the kitchen table, the quiet, the drawing left behind. "At what cost?" he asked. She met his eyes. "You know the answer." He stood. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor. He didn't apologize. "I need to pick up my child," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Now?" "Yes." She watched him for a moment, then nodded. "We'll talk later." "Maybe," he said. He left the room without rushing. At the school, he waited by the fence. Other parents stood nearby, checking phones, talking in low voices. He kept his eyes on the door. When his child came out, they hesitated before spotting him. Then they walked over. "You're early," they said. "Yes," he replied. They walked to the car together. Halfway there, the child stopped. "Are you going to miss again?" they asked. He opened the car door, then closed it. He turned to face them fully. "I don't want to," he said. They considered that. "That's not the same," they said. "No," he agreed. He drove home slower than usual. Traffic built behind him. He didn't change lanes. That night, he declined the follow-up email without explanation. The pressure did not disappear. It simply lost its witness. The response came the next morning, not immediately, not with urgency. A short message, polite in tone, neutral in language. It thanked him for his time and acknowledged his decision. It said nothing about disappointment. It didn't need to. The man read it once, then again. He locked his phone and set it on the counter, screen down. He did not tell himself anything about it. He let it sit. At breakfast, his child ate slowly. They hummed under their breath, something without words. The sound filled the space where conversation used to go. "I can walk today," they said. He looked up. "I can drive." They shook their head. "I want to walk." He nodded. "Okay." They left together a few minutes later. The air was cool. The street was quiet. Leaves had gathered near the curb, pressed flat by traffic. Halfway down the block, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He didn't check it. He kept his pace steady. At the corner, his child stopped. "You don't have to come all the way," they said. "I know," he replied. They waited. He stayed. When they reached the school gate, the child paused again. They didn't step inside right away. "Are you mad?" they asked. "No," he said. "Sad?" He considered the question. "A little," he said. They nodded, satisfied. Okay. They turned and went through the gate without looking back. At work, the change was subtle. He was no longer copied on certain emails. Meetings happened without him. Projects shifted hands quietly. No one explained anything. His boss passed him in the hallway once that afternoon. She slowed, then stopped. You didn't have to make it a statement, she said. He looked at her. I didn't. She held his gaze. You chose absence. Yes, he said. She nodded. That has a cost. I know, he replied. She studied him for a moment longer, then walked on. The cost showed up in small ways, in the tone of conversations, in the absence of expectation, in the way his calendar emptied without relief. At home, the evening stretched. He cooked, he cleaned, he sat at the table while his child drew. One night they slid a piece of paper toward him without looking up. It was a new drawing. The house was still uneven. The figures were closer together now. He did not comment. He folded it and put it in the same place as the others. Later, after bedtime, he stood in the kitchen and listened to the quiet. The phone did not ring. No message came. The loss did not arrive as a single moment. It spread out, thin and persistent. He had traded position for presence, certainty for something harder to measure. There were things he would not get back. He accepted that, and in doing so let something else remain. The morning settled into a shape he recognized. Not the old one. A quieter version. Fewer alerts. Fewer decisions that reached beyond the walls of the house. He woke before his alarm most days now, not because he had to, but because his body had learned the hour again. He made breakfast. The same as always. Eggs, toast, fruit cut smaller than necessary. His child sat at the table, feet hooked around the chair legs, watching him without asking questions. You don't rush anymore, they said once. He glanced at the clock. I don't need to. They nodded and went back to eating. At work, his roles stayed defined. Narrower. Clear. He did what was asked. Nothing more. Nothing hidden. When the day ended, it ended. His phone stayed in his pocket on the drive home. Sometimes he passed the building where meetings still happened without him. The glass reflected the street. He didn't slow down. One afternoon, rain kept them inside. His child spread papers across the living room floor, coloring quietly. He folded laundry nearby, matching socks by feel. Can you sit? They asked. He did. They leaned against him without looking up. The weight was familiar. He adjusted his arm so it rested where it always had. You stayed, they said. Yes, he replied. They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet, he stood by the window and watched the streetlight flicker on. The world outside moved the same way it always had. Cars passed. People walked by with places to be. His phone buzzed once. A notification he didn't open. It stopped buzzing. Nothing followed. He picked up the drawing from the table. The uneven house. The two figures closer now, and taped it to the refrigerator. He didn't smooth it flat. He let the corners curl. In the morning, his child noticed it. You put it up, they said. Yes. They smiled briefly. Then they put on their shoes without being reminded. When they left the house together, he locked the door behind them and checked it once. Then he stopped. At the corner, they reached for his hand. He took it. The day moved forward. Not lighter, not easier, just changed.